There's no denying that the typical basic compound movements are critical, but when you see something that stands out, some unique movements that might look a little abstract, you don't want to just throw them away entirely because they're not a conventional compound movement. So I've got Judd Lienhard, who's someone that I followed for quite a while, who inspired me to kind of change some of my movement patterns and how I lift. So we've got 10 of the most unconventional, semi-weird looking exercises that actually have the most bang for the buck. So Judd, why do you take this approach that you take?
After today's video, I put a link down below for an entire variety pack of LMNT electrolyte flavors. So their citrus salt, their lemon habanero, their mango chili, their chocolate salt, their unflavored, all their awesome flavors. You get a free variety pack with any purchase. One of the things that I have talked about in other videos is if you're sleep deprived, sipping on electrolytes does help make it so that you're not wanting to eat everything in sight. Because we do know the literature suggests your brain gets activated a lot more by food cues when you're sleep deprived. I've noticed personally, anecdotally, sipping on electrolytes seems to help. They are a sponsor on this channel, they do support this channel, and your support in trying them not only is something I'd recommend, but it helps keep us doing what we're doing. So I thank you for giving them a shot, and I highly, highly do recommend them. So that link is down below, just beneath this video in the top line of the description.
So, I'll start from the ground up, and just some things that I believe that are fairly the fly in the face of what most people believe. I believe that the barbell is not the most natural way to lift, right? And I love the barbell. There's a lot of benefits to the barbell. You can load a lot of weight on it. It's fairly cheap. It's fairly portable. It's accessible, right? But when you think about it, it's not natural to move something in a straight line that has a free floating bearing. Like, let's think about what the barbell is. It's not just a rod, right? It has a bearing in it that lets the barbell twist so you can move weights around a linear pull, right? So it's something that was invented, right? So I do not believe the barbell has to be the basis for all our exercise. I do not believe that heavy compound movements have to be linear and unsupported. They don't have to be. I feel like we can use machines and support the body for certain purposes to create the stimulus that we want to create, which is mechanical tension on a certain muscle group. I do not believe that exercise always has to be on your heels. I feel like we need to get off our heels more. So there's a tendency to drill into athletes' heads when they're in the weight room, always keep your heels planted. And then they get on the field of play. Very rarely do you have the luxury of having your heels planted, or should you have your heels planted on the field of play. In the weight room, we tend to drive into people, keep your feet flat on the ground. On the field of play or in real life, they very rarely have that luxury either. They're always internally or externally rotated and always knife edging one side of their foot to the ground or the other. So I'm not saying that everything from the field of play has to be transferred into the weight room, because obviously that's not good either. We need to be on our heels for some certain movements. But we need to blend it a little bit better than we do. Moving on, narrow bases of support. We need to narrow our base of support more when we lift for a lot of reasons. But we always want a big, wide, stable base support. And sometimes we need to narrow that base and train under load with a narrow base support. Also, we always want a flat back when we lift. I don't believe that either. I believe we need to let our spine flex strategically and intelligently in a progressive manner. We don't always want our shoulder blades pulled back. We need to let our shoulder blades protract. We need to let our arms internally rotate sometimes. We need to create positions that mimic real life and intelligently and systematically train those positions to make us more robust for those real life positions. Now, I'm not saying that's all we need to do. We also need to overload the system with heavy weights and load. But that is part of the system that I feel like is being left out the most, are the things that I just covered. Another thing is we need to train moving our upper and lower body independently of one another. Let our lower body move one way and let our upper body move another. Disassociate is kind of the term for it, to create a stretch and a position that allows you to express power in a movement. So when you think about certain football players, quarterbacks, golfers, javelin throwers, they can all disassociate their lower and upper bodies to create that torque and potential energy to then project force onto an object. I always say, like, when I knew, I love Brian Urlacher, when I knew his playing days were coming to an end is when he couldn't open his hips and keep his chest square to the line of scrimmage. He kind of lost that ability a little bit. So those things are like crucial tenets to what I incorporate in workouts that I believe are fairly unusual.
Got it. No, that's amazing. Because when you look at just briefly, Nutrition has these pinnacles too, and that's like, I don't always look at that and say, I don't believe that is the case, right? I don't believe that is the only way. And it's not to say like, that's why I was attracted to your content in the first place, was you had this approach that was like, you weren't throwing things under the bus. You weren't saying there's nothing wrong with squatting. There's nothing wrong with deadlifting, but are we looking at the whole picture here? Like, is this, and I've always looked at nutrition the same way. I'm like, calories, great. Like, I get it, very important, but are we missing something that could be bigger? Like, so maybe we should address all these different, because it's not very often that we can count every single calorie that we get into our body, right? Just like we're not gonna be on our heels in the playing field. So what are some other approaches that are realistic and pragmatic based upon, ways that you can implement that with nutrition? So
it's the same thing, like, don't throw things away. Like, I'm not gonna look at powerlifters and throw away what they do. They bring value to the table. Yoga, people that practice yoga and Pilates, people that do body weight training, calisthenics, they all bring stuff to the table. And if we're open about it and consider it, then we can incorporate what we believe are the best elements of those things for us. Like, people tend to look at things they're not familiar with and just throw them away. Yeah. Another tenet to me is don't do anything just to be different. Have a reason that you can explain why you're doing it.
Yeah. That's the definitely the way of the world, man. All right, well, let's jump into the first one.
So I'm an enormous fan of kettlebells. Okay. Like, I love them for various reasons. Probably, if there was a basic implement to me, it would not be the barbell, it'd probably be the kettlebell. Okay. The barbell can build onto the kettlebell. One of the reasons I love the kettlebell is because it encourages curvilinear movement.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I hate it. I do not like it when I see trainers that are unfamiliar with kettlebell movements trying to get athletes to move kettlebells like they would dumbbells.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the curvilinear nature of the kettlebell, its design is great for improving athleticism and functional ability.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So I also like to, I love farmers carries. Carries are a basic human function. Load up a bunch of weight and move with it. But I just believe for time efficiency, we can maybe at some point add things onto those carries. So move while we turn around our central axis and things like that, in order to get more benefits from one exercise than just the benefit of carrying a load.
Got it.
Which carries a big benefit, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like these kettlebell walking coils. I kind of made up the name. If somebody else come up with a better name, I'm open to it. But basically, as you get in a stance, and then to do this, you have to create lines here where your knee is pointed one way and your chest the other. So you want your shoulder and knee pointed in the best way. Now, if I was gonna rotate to be square on my foot here, my knee's gonna collapse, see that? Yep. And then it's gonna send me this way.
Yeah.
So that just re-encourages that need to knife edge your foot. And then forward propulsion through the ground, drive and switch sides, being on the outside edge, fluidly of the other foot, in one motion like this. And then when we get here, we push and we go backwards.
Yeah. It's one thing we don't do with carries very often.
Yeah. And you're gonna mess up doing these. I just messed up a little bit, it's fine. So this obviously can't be the only thing you do. It's a great way to build functional capability while moving through space.
Yes.
And being aware of where your center of mass is, where your balance point is, train your body to move independently upper to lower.
Yeah.
Internal, external rotation, T-spine mobility. It checks a lot of boxes with one move, basically.
You're almost, in a way, you're almost going into a curtsy lunge in some ways too. Like, that movement is very similar to.
Absolutely, because you have to be completely lined up, and to do that, you have to be outside edge.
Yeah. So nice, not bad for probably quad hypertrophy. If you could almost take it the next level and move it into a lunge and beyond a carry if you wanted.
Absolutely, yeah, I've done that too. So I'll have my athletes grab the horns and they'll lunge down all the way to the ground, forward, all the way to the ground. To do that, they're gonna hold it more by the hip and grab it by the horns.
Or you have them full on reverse lunging all the way back too, or is it only forward movement with the actual
Most
lunge?
athletes aren't ready for that.
Yeah.
But that's definitely, and if they do that, that's a good question. You're gonna wanna start with your front foot elevated on a plate to make the reverse lunge a little easier, and just kind of go forward and backwards at first. So there's a whole series of movements, the forward and back lunge, with an explosive pattern that is very similar to this, but a little bit different.
Yeah, it's almost like, if someone's playing defense, they may have a little more coordination kind of going that way, right? Like, it's just, but you
get
guys
someone to move backwards. Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
With a different setup, if these are more narrow and we had thicker bands, it would look a little bit different.
Okay.
It's a bear crawl hold where you press straight down on thicker bands, and when you get there, then you're gonna raise your knees up off the ground.
Okay.
So the setup here is a little different. It's a little too wide to do that exact, but it opened up, some like obstacles away, right? So sometimes you'll have challenges that will open up new opportunities. So this was too wide for me to do that. But then I realized, like, they're so wide here I can almost get a lot of the same benefit, and I get a little bit of compression inwards here. So when I compress down, and I'm not able to bring my knees off the ground, but I can at least tighten my abs up and take a little bit of force off my knees as I press and hold. And then when you come out like this, you can actually sink down into it and then press until you reach your end range, and then just allow your torso to come up a little bit so you can finish that range of motion, and then just hold.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a way to do a fly if you don't have a fly machine.
Yeah, here, I'm gonna try and have you kind of walk me through it.
And then you're gonna like stack your elbows. They're actually gonna be flared out a little bit.
Okay.
Yep. Tighten your abs up, and then drive your hands together. And then just try to hold that squeeze. There you go. See how you're rounding your back? See, that's good. Yeah. Then keep your abs tight. Now, as you come out, sink down your chest down. There you go. Then drive, and when you reach end range, then you can let your chest come up to finish. Now hold that and try to put your fists towards the ground a little bit. There you go. So that way you're working that serratus anterior and that's the scapula as well.
What's your take on having like neck movement in there? Like, you know, again, you kind of typical kind of thing when you're working with a barbell. You're like, okay, keep that neck in line with the thoracic. Do you think there's really a problem to drop the head or to keep the?
I see a lot of like high level bench presses let their head come forward.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, it's bad when they drive the neck forward, or probably even worse is when they pin the neck to the back of the pad as they're pressing. So if the neck naturally, because of a range of motion, like joints work together, like when one joint, for whatever reason, runs out of its range of motion, other joints along the chain are supposed to pick up that slack, right? That's why I'm not a huge fan of like taping ankles or wearing knee braces, because it might protect the knee, but joints up and down that chain are gonna have to take the load for that, right?
Yep.
So if you run out of range of motion here, that neck is coming forward to give you a little bit of more range of motion. And if you try to artificially keep that chin tucked, something else is gonna have to load that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't work your neck range of motion, but if you're pressing and it wants to come forward a bit, let it come forward a bit. Just don't cram it forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let things move if they want to move to a certain extent. That's my take on things.
No, for sure. The body's incredibly resilient. I mean, you look at like very seldom does like a back injury happen from the actual back, right? It's a lot of times a hip driven issue, right? Because like when you limit the range here, it's always going to move up the kinetic chain and it's going to go to the next joint, right? So your hip have this limited mobility. So, okay, the hip can only go into extension here. So then what's the next joint, right? So it's like, if that's your range, right? So it's like when you're pressing, if your head comes forward because that is your range, sometimes trying to force that to maintain proper mechanics is putting yourself in a compromise.
Yeah, injuries come through trying to force ranges of motion that we're not ready for, basically. You know what I mean? Like you see gymnasts that do things with their arms cocked way behind them that would break most people in half.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just doesn't, because they're prepared for that range of motion.
For sure.
You know what I mean? Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, next one.
Okay, so I said that barbells aren't considered, like, to me, a basic implement, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't love barbells. I offer a ton of benefit. And anybody that follows me on Instagram knows that I love Zercher squats.
Yeah.
And all Zercher squat variations. So, and I also love Cossack squatting. And then Cossack squat is kind of like side lunge, you got your feet moving.
Yep.
So I like to combine the Zercher element with the Cossack squat to a box and then let myself twist a little bit when I get down there. So I'm not having to try to find my range of motion. I kind of know where it is. I can let myself sit. I can feel everything's right, and then I can generate tension slowly in a proper pattern to come back up.
Got it.
So I'm gonna just carry the barbell that way a little bit. And then
You fan of any of the Zercher pads, or do you?
I actually hate them.
Yeah, they kind of like force you to. They kind of slip and. Yeah.
So here's why. The only reason the Zercher squat is safe is because it's a very small moment arm, right? There's a lot of weight here that if we were to move that weight even a little bit this way, a huge amount of tension builds on the bicep in a hurry. So you have to keep it close to your body, and you have to keep your forearms almost vertical, and then it's safe. But if you let that bar go here and your forearms go here, it like doubles the load on your bicep tendon. Yep. So those bicep pads make it more comfortable on the arm, but they literally take where the barbell sits and they move it just an inch that way, and it doubles the load on the biceps tendon. Yep. So I've never seen anybody that can Zercher squat like 300 pounds or more use one of those pads. And I think they instinctively know this is dangerous.
Yeah.
So that is what can make Zercher safe, is they keep it right here.
Interesting. Yep.
So I don't like to hate on the people selling those things. They've tried to get me to sponsor them a bunch of times, and I just don't say anything back to them.
Yeah.
I hate those things.
Yeah.
Like they're
No,
very
for
dangerous
sure.
in my opinion.
Well, for me, they're also uncomfortable. I don't really like them. It feels weird, but
It's just like putting a barbell on your back at first.
with a pad, it feels weird.
Yeah. And at first it's uncomfortable barbell. You get used to it, you know, like, so, you know, dig it in deep here. I like to support each hand, feel like it's comfortable. And then I just go back here, find my range of motion. And then what I'll do is I'll sit and I'll anchor this heel in and I let my torso turn a little bit. And then I just sit on that bench. And then I load, feel the pattern, and then I come back to neutral. And then, so what you can do too, when you can create a little bit of momentum here that you then have to overcome. So then you get a little twisted. You don't have to do this. It's just a step up. So see, I'm creating horizontal momentum that then my core has to overcome so I can get multi-directional forces going on here.
I like that.
So, love Zerchers, love Cossacks.
I'm gonna try that just with a bar, just because I want to get the feel of it. Because I'm a huge fan of Cossack squats too. Like that's. Okay, so I noticed you had, one leg was kind of back a little bit, right? Were you on the toe or were you?
More on the heel and way out to the side.
Yeah.
Yep. And then just twist as you go down.
So it was twisting
The other way.
The other way. Gotcha. There we go.
Yep. Good.
And am I coming into Cossacks?
Not on the other side, not with these, but a normal Cossack, yeah, you definitely can.
Okay.
And then you can twist with a little bit of speed, and you'll start to feel that momentum.
That adductor's great though, man.
Yeah. So it kind of gets that.
And you're sitting and completely relaxing it all the way?
I do, but you don't have to. You can also just use it as like a guide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no like one way to skin a cat, man.
Yeah, just let the momentum naturally happen. Needs some work, but that's...
So a tool that I love for these is a safety bar, because you have handles and you can use those handles to generate speed and then also help you overcome the speed. So they're here already, so you can like use them in the proper movement.
Interesting.
I'm actually a big fan of safety bars.
Yeah, I can feel that just as someone with tight adductors for sure. Like that is a money movement, because Cossack squats already are great for me with tight adductors.
Them.
Like I feel my back, everything feels so good the day after, like something turned on. Can never put my finger on what.
When I started doing Cossack squats, I swear a lot of my injuries started going away over time. I think can't put my finger on exactly what it was, because of other things in conjunction with that. I feel like Cossack squats should be a staple in people's. And you don't have to go that low. If you can't like sit on something higher, like you can stay within your own comfortable range of motion.
For the sake of content, the sake of video, like can you just demonstrate a Cossack squat just so they can see, because they might be saying Cossack squat, but people are like, what
Like
the heck?
just with a barbell, or
or just
or just no weight.
Even no weight, just proper technique on it. Because I feel like almost just a simple regression of what you were just showing is for someone that's needing.
So you can hold a dumbbell here. You can even use a barbell. You can even hold a dumbbell low. The implement doesn't matter as much. But another thing is, like, I'm not afraid to let my heel come off the ground here.
Yeah.
Like when it needs to give, it gives. And then from here, it's kind of up and back into the other side range of motion here. What I also love to do is pendulum Cossacks as part of the warm up, where I lean back here, and if I wasn't hanging on, I'd fall down. And then as I come down, I also go forward, so it creates that shearing force there.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets me ready for the heavier shearing forces. So I push up and back and over in more of a curvilinear motion here.
Interesting.
So that is one of my favorite warm-ups for my athletes.
Yeah.
Is the pendulum Cossacks.
Yeah. All right, what's next, man?
So I love single arm push-ups, and like most people think they'll never be able to do a single arm push-up. But there's all different kinds of accommodations, adjustments you can make to where almost anybody can do a single arm type of a push-up. And also I found ways to kind of implement some of the other things I was talking about as far as the athletic necessities, moving the upper and lower body independently of each other, incorporating the spine more to accommodate range of motion, things like that, into my single arm push-ups. So one of my favorite ways to do it, and almost anybody can do this because you can use the other hand for as much help as you want. So people forget, like if you can't do something, if you have another limb, that other limb can always assist you in the motion. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to get in a very low stance here. So first of all, that's gonna get my hips kind of open up a little bit. And you can put your hand however on the bench, and you can lower yourself down. And when you get to the point, you can have this other hand, and then you can continue down and stretch, and then use this hand to help you until you get to a point where you don't need it, and finish with a single arm. So I come down, I lower. When I don't feel safe, or when I use the other hand, I continue down to get a better stretch. I push a little bit and finish with a single arm. So you're using part of your body to accommodate the lift.
Gotcha.
And now twist and let your shoulder sink to the ground. And then you get a little bit of core in there. Good.
Ooh, I like that. I got some back pops out of it too.
I mean, so you're strong enough where you don't really technically need the other hand, but if you want to wear a weight vest or something like that, or even elevate your feet, you definitely could.
Even then, well, if I did it on left, it might be a different story, right? Who knows? But it's, because when I'm doing it from the floor, I'm in such an odd position. I'm not getting the range because it's like my hip is hitting the ground first.
Yeah.
So even though I can do a single arm push-up, it's like, because I'm having to be staggered, it's like I'm coming down my...
It's a very awkward
It's a
motion.
limited range anyway.
Yeah.
So this allows me, I've never seen it like this, in the sense where...
You just stay square as long as you can, abs tight, and then you can bring that left leg up really high so you get a good hip, or the right leg, I'm very sorry, the right leg. Yep. There you go. Good, now on the way down, stay square until you run out of range of motion in your chest, and then let your torso turn to accommodate, and then try to explode halfway. Well, that's perfect, man, those are great.
That feels tremendous on the back. The amount of pops I got.
I wasn't gonna do this. I can show you guys a variation I love that wasn't gonna be one of the 10, but I just love this variation so much. Seems like a complicated setup, man, but it's fairly straightforward here. So you just roll a bench under here. And you can use this for power, a single arm power push-up, because there's so much accommodation at the bottom that you can spring out of the bottom fairly fast. So what I do here is I'll put this on my forearm and then I'll keep this down. And then when I'm here, I have to stay engaged, but then I can drive up really fast and drive this into the ground, drive up really fast. So you can, this isn't crazy hard, but it's more of like a power movement. See that?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to try that out or not.
Yeah. So very similar. So this was coming around the forearm there?
And then you're here, and then stay tight here, so use your serratus.
This was sticking forearm?
Yep. And so that you're gonna end up resting that forearm right on the ground. That's it, man, good. Hold on, we're gonna go a little bit higher up here. Yep, and then point this down, make a fist, knife edge. There you go. Good, now take your elbow and hold your elbow here.
Okay.
Yes, now drive that elbow to the ground. Drive. There it is. Drive.
Dude, that feels amazing through here.
Yeah, so
I don't get that drive through here that I would normally get either. So that's... Yeah,
so
that's
it's
awesome.
not just, it's like, don't do it because it looks cool. Like, what's the reason behind it? And for me, great range of motion, and I can gooch some power because accommodate it out of that range of motion.
Yeah.
So when you're stuck here, you're already opened up as much as you can, but you still gotta like push from that position, right? So one of the reasons I love bands, man, they're accommodating. So they lose tension as you get to a more vulnerable joint position, right? So naturally, they're portable, right? And like, you can anchor them to most anything. So that's why I love bands. Yeah. So this is like a vacation movement, right? Or something like that, where you don't have any equipment on you, but you want to be able to create a lot of tension. So people think when they're on vacation, the alternative is like calisthenics, conditioning. They give up on the notion that they can like have high degrees of muscle tension. And so what you can do is you just can create a cross pattern motion here to where you pull here, create some tension, and then you drive down using that tension and holding. And there's no eccentric there. And eccentric, well, there's a little bit of eccentric. Eccentric is an important part of muscle growth, but it's not the only factor.
Yeah.
So for a few days in a row, just by creating a lot of tension, and you get a lot of core activation here too. So you can put this down a little bit lower if you want. Pull hard and just drive and hold. And let it go.
There's a reciprocal action there. I mean, you got to pull almost as hard as you have to push.
Cross pattern. It's extremely important, everything. Cross pattern, like drive that into your thinking. Exercise, part of your exercises, part of your workout has to be cross push pull.
Yeah.
Like it's very important for athletics.
Yeah, I didn't start learning that until way too late, right? It was just a matter of so then you get put in a position where you're compromised because you just don't have that reciprocal ability.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like a neurological thing too. Like you look at farmers, man, they might not be able to bench, but like they have pry a gate open, so they can pry a gate open, right? Like functional things that we do every day we don't even think about.
For sure, yeah. Okay, so it's just regular overhand?
Yep, and you're gonna pull a lot of tension first.
Okay.
With the right arm. Okay, now you're gonna drive and just try to bring the hands so they're vertical. And just hold that tension for about 3 or 4 seconds and let it go slowly. And then same thing, everything starts through the ground, knife edge, turn it, drive it down to the ground.
Yeah.
So the cool thing is one band. So you can anchor a band at different points and you only bring one band with you and work both sides of your body at once, basically, by anchoring it different. Also, like, this doesn't have to be the only thing you do in the workout. Like, you can do your burpees, squat jumps, your lunges, and just in between, do some high tension stuff. Yeah. So
that's, I think, like a big takeaway that I take from this is the isometric moves and things like that. I mean, it's, especially if you're doing a Metcon style thing anyway, like, that's typically how I train a lot of the time, not all the time. But this kind of thing after doing burpees or after doing box jumps would be flipping ridiculously hard, right? It's just like, it's hard just to get my brain clicked on enough to do that as is. You imagine doing that when you're already fatigued.
So just in the last year, I've started to combine isometrics with Metcon type work.
Yeah.
So either in conjunction with a rowing machine, or I'll be on a treadmill and I'll run for 30 seconds on an incline on a treadmill pretty fast. The band will be hanging from one of the arms. I'll hop off, shut the treadmill off for safety, and then I'll take the band and I'll stretch it to the, yeah, I'd risk it. I'd bounce over, and then I stretch the band across, and then I'll just do an isometric hold for like 20 seconds, take the band off, and then do another, rest if I need to, do both sides, whatever I want to do on that day. So isometrics are a great way to like keep the heart rate up, and like you don't have to keep pounding on your joints.
Is there something to the like reciprocal inhibition that kind of happens too, to like, almost like a PNF type effect? Because like when I come out of this, there's some tension on my adductor that I could feel as I was coming here. But then when I come out of it, it's like almost in a proprioceptive, like neuromuscular facilitation type fashion. This has loosened up, and now I'm feeling more.
I don't want to be like too extreme about this, but I almost would be willing to bet if your pec is tight, just drive your elbow into something hard for a few seconds.
Yep.
That will work better, in my opinion,
than stretching.
Yeah,
heck yes.
Now if you combine that with some stretching like PNF, even better.
Yeah.
But press on something to loosen the other thing up. Like it's your nervous system.
Scientifically don't have anything to back that up. Anecdotally, have a shitload to back that up.
Absolutely.
Like for me, for a tight thoracic, what tends to happen for me, like if I go into a press position for a little bit, it kind of loosens up. But same thing with being shoulder driven. Like if I lay on my back, press my tricep into the ground and hold, and even do some pulses like that, I come out of that feeling so just alive, right?
And it's give yourself something to relax into too.
Yeah.
Like do this, and then like have somebody or touch if there's the back of your hand, and just relax into that hand.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more effective than having somebody at first push on that hand. So it's like push, maybe drive a little bit, relax into it, and then stretch it kind of in that sequence. It's kind of like the magic sequence to like mobilize really quickly, rather than just take a tight muscle and just yank on it. And then your brain is like, something's happened, I need to make it tighter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's the big thing here, is like from the neurological piece, is like you're putting yourself, if the stretch is painful, there's a good chance that you are actually making it tighten up more. I mean, that's the way that my brain looks when you look at the nervous system. Anyway, what's next, man?
Okay, so power movements, right? Like we all like came up in the high school system, and our power movements were our jumps, our hang cleans, our push presses, things like that, right? Which are great movements. We get to an age, those things become uncomfortable for us, or dangerous even. We lose shoulder mobility, wrist mobility, things that make those things uncomfortable and dangerous. So the traditional answer is to, hey, fix your mobility. Well, until I can fix my mobility, maybe I don't care that much about mobility, even though you think I should. How do I work my power? And medicine ball throws and throwing is a great solution, but not everybody has access to medicine balls, and we don't have a place we can throw them, right? So we can still do power type movements without the stress on the joints. We don't have to jump. We don't have to get in awkward positions, things like that. Like power isn't a movement, it's a movement speed, right?
Yeah.
So you can turn a squat into a power movement, right? And then you can do traditional full body extensions in a way that for most people is fairly joint comfortable, and in a way that transfers to real life. So, when you think about power in day-to-day life, like we take something from the ground and we put it on our shoulder.
Yeah.
That takes power. You know what I mean? Because it's a fairly light load. We have to do it with some speed to get it up there. So I've taken like a real life moment, and I just like to do these dumbbell shoulder cleans because it's comfortable for me, where I will grab the dumbbell here and I will just toss it and stack it on a shoulder, because that's what's comfortable for me. And then catch it on the way down, stack it on a shoulder.
Huh. Yeah, you don't always have to go pressing overhead.
You don't.
Know? It's like, and you also don't have to get into a clean position where you're compromising
all the
your
joints
wrist.
are lined up.
Yeah, you're just kind of like. Yeah, I dig that.
So for most people, that's very, like most of my adults, 40 and over, this is one of my go-tos, because they can almost all do it with comfort.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the only thing that, you know, depending on the load, is like when you're coming down, not to yank it, I guess, you know.
So the trick with that is they don't flip the elbow fast enough, so they can't control it here, and then it all lands at once. So as you come down, I have them roll the shoulder quickly so they can start to control it sooner and kind of ease into the landing.
That makes sense.
Or they just let it drop.
Yeah.
They hear and they ride it, but then they let it drop.
Yeah.
Like you don't always have to change directions with it.
Yeah. Do you do alternating shoulders on it too?
Yeah,
or
I won't normally do all on one side and then do all the other.
Got it.
But you can, especially if you're athletic, on the way down, switch hands.
Yeah.
You know, and then do it alternating like that. It's fun to do it that way if you get good at it.
No, that's a good one. I think that's a good, because I think people are always looking for, I don't like doing cleans, right? I did enough of them playing sports that I'm just burnt out on them anyway. Yeah. But I also feel like I put myself in somewhat of a compromised spot when I do them. And also it triggers something in my brain where I want to start going heavier just from sport days. But like this is just such a different movement, and it's just more natural. It's like, hey, you're, you know, picking up dead bodies and you know your usual stuff, right? So anyway, what's next?
That may be part of the dead body. So, you know, another thing too, like clean, we forget clean is a sport, right? It came from a sport. So highly trained, highly skilled people do it with great mobility. And we try to superimpose that onto people that don't do that for a living. Yeah. You know, especially young kids. I think it's almost criminal that we have middle schoolers cleaning without going over full mobility first. And not
don't get me started on that. Yeah.
So I'm a huge advocate of rings, man. I honestly, in my opinion, if you had a garage gym and you wanted to put two things in that garage gym, it'd probably be kettlebells and a set of rings. Because just using those two implements, you can do so much stuff with those. And rings, just the nature of the instability and the demand to use your core as you do the ring work carries over like a tremendous benefit to real life. Yeah. One of my favorite things to do with the rings is it's kind of a single arm body weight row finishing with like a turn. So it's just, I call them single arm ring rotations, but you know, if somebody wants to rename that, they can too. So I normally like to have my feet oppositional in some way when I do exercises, and then together I'm gonna pull here and drive hard through my lower body, and then when I get to the top I'm gonna transition to more of a twist here. So it's not a back exercise, it's not a leg exercise, it's a functional pattern exercise where you're having to transfer force from the ground through your hips, through your back, and then from a pull pattern into a push pattern. So we like to like categorize things, and it's not bad to do that, like push-pull, like helps. But sometimes it's push and it's pull. Yeah. You know what I mean? Push-pull together.
For sure. Yeah, let me go through it. So it's,
there it is, man.
Yeah. Good. Do you release this arm or no?
You can. Okay. I don't, because then grip strength becomes a limiting factor on my speed of my pull.
Gotcha. See, it's almost like I'm trying to get velocity from this arm in some ways, but.
Yeah, so I use like the other hand to help my grip so I get more velocity out of the bottom.
Got it.
But you don't have to do that either.
I can see that, yep. It just shows the mind of a bodybuilder versus an athlete, right? Like I'm thinking like a bodybuilder, thinking like, okay, I can get more power this way, when in reality I'm gonna get more power and velocity by actually having more grip, right? So it's like, that's way more powerful versus me thinking like, well, how do I get more power into the lat and do this and think like, you know, compartmentalize my thought. It's, yeah, forces that hip drive into a rotation that you normally have to train independently.
And it's like teaching one movement to flow into the next, right? Like natural human movement.
If you added, I guess you could add a weight vest and add more load to that too.
Absolutely. Oh, dude. Yeah. So another thing is, and this has been, I didn't invent, I don't think I invented that. I don't even know, but you know, grab a ring and hold a dumbbell on the other side and push the dumbbell as you row. So for really strong people, you're gonna row here and push a dumbbell there at the same time.
And could you, even in this move, elevate the ring so that you can get into a deeper row position and almost have to rotate this way and come all the way?
So those are T rows. Okay. So you're here, that's exactly right. You're gonna pull here, which is really hard, and then you're gonna rotate up in one motion. I don't know if I've seen that. I think I've seen that done, but I used to do that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, that's exactly right, man.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. All right, let's get into some skipping. And as for skipping, this is just FYI. I mean, this is how I first came across Judd on Instagram. Was I saw a grown man skipping down the hallway of a gym and with his bright fluorescent shoes. I mean, it definitely was scroll bait for sure. I saw it, I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And I was pretty sold, because it was actually then, you know, as Dale Carnegie would have said, right? It's like, I liked what you were doing, then you spoke and you respected what you were talking about, and you speak with logic and reason, right? Those are the three things that I think you have to like have in order to earn respect and trust. And so it's funny that happened via content. Like, it caught my eye, that was different. But then the fact that there was like skipping movements that looked completely unconventional from a guy, especially of your size. So that's how I got turned on to the content in the first place. So explain to me like why you're a fan of skipping and how this.
These are A skips, very common. They've been around for a long time. I have a love-hate relationship with them because they were taken as a track prep drill used by football coaches to warm up football players, but not taught appropriately. And then they really wire in the inappropriate movement patterns. So it's very important that we do them the right way, first of all. I love skipping and speed drills because it encourages the bounce. We have to get the bounce back. Like, we lose bounce as we get older. And that's a hard thing to put your finger on, but you can just see people that have that bounce and twitch and rhythm. Yeah. Now, at least the next thing, rhythm. Like, it teaches rhythm. Like, we need, like, life is about rhythm, movement's about rhythm. We have to get our rhythm back in our movement. The other thing is, we think in terms of muscles. What's the muscle doing, right? And it's easy to do that when we're bodybuilding because we're moving on one thing. It's easy to relax all the muscles that we're not needing, or even worse, that do the opposite. So, you know, and good thing we do, we have agonists and we have antagonist muscles, right? The force you put in the ground is only partly the result of the agonist producing force. A big part of that equation is how well can we relax the antagonist. Okay. So when you see bodybuilders that push a lot of weight slowly in the same patterns over and over again, and then you get them out there and they do skips, they look like a fish out of water and they get tired fast because they don't know, they know how to contract, they forgot how to relax. Yeah. So a part of movement, a big part of movement is learning how to relax and sequence things appropriately. Yeah. So skipping, you can't really start with skipping. Or you shouldn't anyway, if you've never done it. First of all, you have to start with the patterning. So the first thing you do, it's very important to keep a tall hip here and a neutral pelvis. Like, you don't want to be up here, right? Like just everything else, like boxing, fighting, running. So when you sprint, you don't want to sprint like this. You want to kind of be into it a little bit.
Yeah, sprinter's hunch.
Yep. So we're going to stand tall on this leg, and what we're going to do is we're going to pretend like there's a cord that runs this way, and we're going to snag that cord on the way up and keep this parallel with that. Yeah. So a lot of people, when they A-skip, they don't think about the up and they come up like this. Yeah. So when they go to skip, what they do is they stab down. Like, your quad's a braking muscle. Yeah. You can't run forward going like that. You run forward with the scissor motion back. So you have to come up the right way to create space to scissor down. Yeah. So it's a hip dominant movement. So people A-skip like this, that's a backwards or a stopping motion.
Got it. Okay.
That is not a forward. You can do it. You can break and then push. Runners do that, sprinters do that all the time. Poor sprinters, they'll break, they'll stab, and then they'll push and go forward, and then just tear their knees apart. Yeah. So it has to be, as we get faster, it has to be what they call a whip from the hip, to where you create a short lever and you relax and you just whip from the hip. It's a whipping type motion. Yeah. So, but it starts with the A-skip, and basically you just get the hop going, and it's nice and easy. Everyone is just stab down on the ground. It's an easy up. Posture and up, and just get that rhythm going, and then just let yourself gradually move forward. And the thing you're thinking about here is the pattern on the way up the spring in your feet, not stabbing the ground, but springing,
Yeah.
and tall hips. So tall hips do not mean tall chest.
Yeah.
It never fails. When I say keep your hips tall, they go like this.
Yeah.
That's not your hips, man. Those tall hips here.
Yep.
Everything compact here, tall hips here. Like this, look in the mirror. If every time you come up, you go down, see how your hip split is not increasing?
Yeah. Yep.
That's increasing. So to raise the knee, if this comes down, that's I call Pied Pipering, like that.
Yep.
So kids will sprint like that. It's like tall hips first.
Yep.
So the biggest thing, it's hard for kids to raise their knees, but when I sit them down, they can raise their knee really easily. What's hard for them is to drive through the ground while they raise that knee. So their body is shutting that hip flexion down because it knows that it can't support the weight on the body on the other leg.
Yeah.
So tall hips, nice and relaxed, scissor it back. You shouldn't feel like a huge impact in your knees every time you hit the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'd kind of be like mildly wouldn't even be able to do that anyway. Like it's like what am I, double bouncing or what's the?
You can double bounce your A skips.
Yeah.
It's just like jump rope, right? Like
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, like I want to go into a double bounce, right? It's just like my brain just doesn't. I mean, that's a perfect example, and that's why I brought you here. Is because
So how
by
we
the
do
way,
it
I'm
is
not. I'm
there's a
terrible
really
at this.
simple progression. So we just start with A walking like this,
Okay.
where we go heel toe,
Yeah.
and this drive up in the proper pattern. And then after that, but nobody wants to go through these progressions, right? They don't pay
yeah.
off.
Yeah.
After that, we do a marching, where we stay on the balls of the feet, and we just march into the ground. And then we can go to single leg skipping, where we just skip one side.
Yeah, that's probably where I'd have to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just get that rhythm and then do the other
Yeah.
side.
Wait. Yeah, that left side is completely messed up from my back. So even with a single leg skip, do it again.
So start with the bounce first, and then bounce, tuck, bounce, tuck. So I say it.
Yeah.
Because it helps me. Bounce, tuck, bounce, tuck, bounce, tuck, bounce, tuck, bounce, tuck.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to practice this in private, but I mean it's it's that bad for me, right? But it's,
And then from there, we go into what I call scissor skipping, which is a straight leg. It's much more hamstring and glute dominant. So it's just like the A skip, but it's a straight leg. So you see like trainers, I hate this. They have their athletes warm up by this. You ever see that?
Yep.
So the athlete hasn't even moved, and now you're having to do this awkward like toe touch.
Yeah.
A scissor skip, when you reach your range of motion, you can let it lift you off the ground. It's much safer. And it gets that bounce going.
Interesting.
So just scissor skipping, a little tight right now, but.
And that's, I mean, I would imagine, is this something sprinters are gonna do prior to sprinting, or is it more a drill for them? I mean, is it something that's...
It's both.
Yeah.
So, there's, once again, arbitrary.
Yeah.
There's intensive plyos, like vertical jumping, broad jumping, depth jumping, and there's extensive plyos, easy hopping, rhythm hopping. You can do extensive plyos like every day.
Yeah.
Like I would actually recommend it. So people think, here's the weird thing to me, I do not hate jogging, but they go out and they jog literally every day.
Yeah.
It's the same movement pattern, same movement speed, and they just beat their joints into the ground.
Yeah.
But when I say somebody should do the drills every day, they look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, like you jog every day, do the drills every day.
For sure.
And you can, like, I'm already out of breath, I'm not sure, but I'm already out of breath from the drills. You can do the drills in a way that gives you a cardio benefit.
Yeah.
Just do them for longer, don't rest as long.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, and I think the regressions are great, because I think people, I mean, they think skipping is just, this, right? That's exactly, we're doing the braking exactly like, right?
Yeah.
So it's, for me, and like, even playing sports growing up, I ran cross country and I played rugby, and in rugby they didn't teach us any of this stuff at all, right? Had I run track, they were doing that stuff in track, but I was cross country where it was just all slow and go, right? And then translate that into rugby, which just didn't have the same resources thrown at it that track and football did. It was just kind of like,
So the problem with distance events is they depend on the athlete to already have good biomechanics, and they just build capacity on top of that.
Correct.
If cross country would take a break and work on their biomechanics, they would become much more efficient.
Agreed.
They would take the athlete with the same capacity, and he'd run faster.
Yep.
So we have machines that literally measure how much braking force you're doing on each step and how much energy you're wasting on each step.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's very important to be efficient in your movement.
Yeah. No, I love that, man. Well, Judd, where can everyone find you, brother?
JuddLienhard.com, and my Instagram is @JuddLienhard.
Awesome. I'll link out to all that stuff as well. Thanks, my man.
Thank you, brother.